Never underestimate the power of the big banks to disappoint us. Well, we know that happens, but now they are actively trying to hurt us, or at the very least take away our rights. That's what I'm going to be talking about in this story about one huge bank that has gone beyond the pale and done the unforgivable. We're going to talk about that and why gold and silver are so important as we explore. The dollar. It's tied to the Federal Reserve System, which is made up of all of these big banks that are out there. And one bank in particular has crossed the line, the red line of our rights. I'm going to be referencing a story here from the Carolina Journal. This story just broke, and it is a doozy. This week, news emerged of a behind closed doors February interview of retired FBI National Security Intelligence Supervisor George Hill by the U.S. House Judiciary Committee's Select Subcommittee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government. One North Carolina Congressman, Representative Dan Bishop, sits on the committee and has been very vocal about the weaponization of federal bureaucracies against everyday citizens. In the interview, Hill says Bank of America, which is North Carolina's largest company, gave the FBI data on all their customers who happened to purchase anything in and around Washington, D.C. from January 5th through January 7th of 2021 in an effort to identify potential rioters who were at the storming of the Capitol. Hill also has spoken to conservative media on the subject as well. Of course, sometimes a company will receive a court order saying that they need to turn over information to law enforcement. It is generally the right thing to do to comply, unless there are ethical reasons not to do so. But Hill says the Bank of America mined their own customers' data and voluntarily handed over to the FBI without being asked. Yes, this is egregious. This is something that's worse than what happened with the truckers, by the way, up in Canada. Bank of America identified anyone who used one of their products, like a credit or debit card, on those dates in those areas and handed the list of people over to federal law enforcement. The list further pinpointed anyone who had purchased a firearm, regardless of where and when. That's right. So if you bought one of these at that particular time in and around Washington, D.C., well, you were targeted. Your privacy was violated. Your rights were violated. So if you bought a gun in 1994 in Montana with a Bank of America credit card and then happened to visit D.C. on January the 5th and bought something else with a Bank of America credit card while you were there, your bank handed over your name and personal information to the FBI, if Hill's testimony is correct. And by the way, that testimony has got to be scrutinized, but I watched a little clip that they showed there, and it sounds like he was giving caveats and information, trying to, was very, very, very detailed and careful with his statements, for sure. Earlier reporting suggested that Bank of America had been asked for the information, but was not given a court order. Bank of America's response to this at the time was, "We don't comment on our communication with law enforcement." All banks have responsibilities under federal law to cooperate with law enforcement inquiries in full compliance with the law. Of course, if they did this without being asked or prompted, at least officially, then you know that it's bad news. And this should be front page story in every paper in America, in my view. But will it be? No. I had to dig to find this. I heard it on the radio in a small blip today, and as I record this video, and that was it. So, in U.S. Code Section 3403, it gives banks the right to hand over customer information to law enforcement, which may be relevant to a possible violation of any statute or regulation. But it's highly unusual for banks to initiate broad investigations of their customers' purchase history to place them in certain locations. And I tell you what, 12 U.S. Code Section 3403 I think is a violation of the Constitution. If this is how it's interpreted here, gives them the right to hand over customer information to law enforcement without being prompted or asked. To me, I think that, it's rarely used, and it's understandable why it would be rarely used, because it is a violation of our rights. Now, they say that there's no privacy right in the Constitution, but nonetheless, it is ownership data, and it's information that the government really should not have, in my view. It's also chilling thought for many to think that all of their purchases are being collected and monitored by a powerful activist corporation who will voluntarily turn those records over to the government. While guns are a popular target of the left, imagine how they feel if purchases of something like the morning after pill were monitored and voluntarily turned over in states that were moving to ban abortion. Yeah, that's actually a very, very good point by the Carolina Journal. So the pattern of activism in the Bank of America is long-standing. In fact, I remember many, many years about a story with illegal immigration, how they were giving loans and benefits to them and bank accounts to illegals. But states like Texas and Louisiana have moved to stop doing business with Bank of America and municipal bond sales to punish them for their anti-gun advocacy, like refusing to loan to certain gun manufacturers. Bank of America is well known as an activist corporation, and it is unlikely to change anytime soon. That's right. They're not worried about our rights. All they want to do is to be able to work to actively stop our rights. And one of those rights is the ability to keep and to bear arms. They don't like that too much. Bank of America is well known for pushing diversity, equity, and inclusion. Folks, that's called DEI. And whenever you find an organization that is involved with diversity, equity, and inclusion, stay far away, because that is bad news. In fact, it's the exact opposite of what those words are intended to mean, or what they want to make you think they mean. Equity is a very polarizing, well, it's actually, yes, it's polarizing, but it's also something that's actually very discriminatory. It's a model of using private companies to advance left-wing dogmas, and even recently announced a zero-down mortgage program targeted only to Black and Hispanic neighborhoods, which legal experts told Carolina Journal pushes right up to the legal line of discriminatory lending practices. Boom, exactly, it's discrimination, and that's exactly what DEI is. It's discrimination. It will also likely hurt those it claims to want to help, repeating many of the same mistakes of the subprime mortgage crisis that caused a recession in 2007. And everybody remember predatory lending? And again, even dating long before that, dating to the 1990s into the early 2000s, that's not in this article, they were actively looking to feed illegal immigration and illegal immigrants that came into this country. Those who still bank with Bank of America can continue to do so if they wish, the piece says here in the Carolina Journal, but they should be aware that their personal information may be divulged to law enforcement, and their interest payments may be used to advance their latest left-wing activist initiatives. So continue that relationship may be outrageous. And again, there may be some of you who bank with Bank of America and have for a long time. They are a huge bank, and it's understandable. It's a big pain to have to change all of your accounts and numbers and everything like that. But I tell you what, if I was a Bank of America customer, I would be very tempted to do so, because, folks, that's not what we signed up for when we chose to bank at a certain institution. And if my bank never does anything like this, and again, we understand that many of these banks, in fact, all of them, if they're of any size, are probably involved in some sort of ESG compliance or measures, which is the next worst thing to diversity, equity, and inclusion. In fact, likely a lot of them have that in there, but this is a gross violation of at least privilege, and I think it's a violation of rights, in my opinion. Now we stand to, what do we do about this? Well, It's reasons like this why we should consider cash. Cash for a lot of purchases, for day-to-day purchases, is to just use cash. It's also a good idea to have gold and silver in your possession. If you have gold and silver and can even find ways to transact in them for some things, even now, there's ways to do it by utilizing gold and silver coins, or you can use the gold back if it's accepted in your state. But nonetheless, gold and silver is a way to have savings outside of the financial institutions. These financial institutions, like Bank of America, we know have agendas, and those agendas do not work to serve your best interest. No, they don't. They work to serve the interest of big government and to enrich themselves in collusion with that big government. And so therefore, it's incumbent upon us to work against that. And what are ways to do that? That is by holding gold and silver. Gold and silver have no agenda. They exist because of what they have been for thousands of years. And so that is something that should make us proud as Americans and as people in other nations, because there's big banks in other countries around the world too that maybe don't have the constitutional protections that we have here in the United States, and they may be even less inclined to be any concern about your privacy or your rights. So keep that in mind, and that's why we hold gold and silver. Folks, this is a very important story. This is a very important issue, and I'm curious to see what you have to say about this in terms of privacy. And I know there are some aspects, it's not explicitly written in the Constitution or Bill of Rights, but I think it is implied. And I guess reasonable people can disagree on that. I'd be very curious to see what your thoughts are, whether you agree or disagree. And what are your thoughts on what Bank of America did here? I think it's egregious. I think it's unforgivable. And this should be a headline story. Sadly, it's not. But this should send up red flags and should scare us all. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. Hope you found this video insightful, informative, and educational. I'd like to extend a multitude of gratitude to you all for watching, and to encourage you to please rate, share, comment, and subscribe.